We are now determined to focus on the growth of our economy. We want our economy to grow, and we want to reduce government spending, but not to reduce the payouts that we give for social grants or for social programs, to reduce the wastage, but also to reduce or to eliminate the corruption, because quite a lot of the money was also, stolen. Quite a lot of money was being wasted. So we are now cutting all that to the bone to make sure that there is no corruption, money is utilized properly. And this hardship will not last forever, and growth is going to happen. It's around the corner, and soon we will be able to alleviate the difficult burden that our people are bearing at the moment.
Well, that's President Cyril Ramaphosa. He's somewhat optimistic, and a lot of people would say he seems to be having good intentions, but the situation does not seem to favor him, notwithstanding what he wishes to see happen in the country. And I start first with the statistic that was revised downwards by the Reserve Bank, where projected growth, however minimal, was supposed to be 1.7, and they are saying they are no longer that optimistic. It's going to be only 1.2% at best this year. And of course, that's SAA earlier this week told us that the unemployment numbers have gone up, and we know South Africans are up in arms about corruption in the government. And the Commission to Investigate State Corruption will be starting its work on the 20th of August. And in the streets, people complaining about fuel price hikes. They are complaining about the increased VAT, food prices, you name it. And then one wonders, is there reason to be optimistic? What else would you have except hope? That is understandable, but that's where we are. Can we go back to what the president said and look at the things that may be giving him the optimism that he's just expressed? Let me start with you, Thabi.
I'm very worried about the economy. So unlike the president, I think that I started this year thinking that there's a bit of optimism, and we started to see the markets react to the new president. And then the reality sunk in that we can't, sentiment is not going to carry us through. We need more than sentiment. And I think that, the market responded equally as I did, in terms of, fine, we've got a new president, then what? I think that we still don't have a direction, and going back to the plan and the vision that we have, I don't know where growth will come from. I think that initially over the years we thought that it will come from commodity prices, but there's nothing that we're doing internally that will trigger growth. And I'm also worried about the haphazard and policies that just come out without evidence and research. So you need evidence-based research to drive policies, or in order for you to create policies, and I'm not seeing that.
Right.
And this is creating uncertainty, and this is creating the uncertainty that we've been seeing all along, that has been flagged by even the rating agencies, to say, look, you have you need to be certain in terms of policy, and you have there's a lot of policy uncertainty.
Let's look at our capacity then, as a country, right? From the planning point of view. Here's a policy maker, or one of the people who influence policy formulation in the country. Let's look at the things that you are working on, that you think probably give the president the kind of hope he has that things at some point will improve.
Okay, so I've got good news and I've got bad news.
Yeah.
Which one do you want first?
I want bad news first, so that you can lift my mood after that, inspire me a bit. Yeah.
Okay. So this economy, based on its capacity, could be growing at 2%. Based on its capacity, we're growing at less than that, 1.3.
Yeah.
So that's the bad news. The good news is, what that means is that the capacity is there. A lot of people are sitting on the fence. There are people who are thinking about investing. There are people who are wanting to do stuff, business activity, but are not quite sure where things are going, right? That's good news. What that means is, if we were to do some basics and give some certainty to them in the short run, and I'm speaking about this year or next year, the way these things work is that when you're underperforming, you can bounce back. So the likelihood is that for a couple of years, we could grow by more than 2%, in fact. So I'm quite sure that that is physically possible. So that's the good news. Okay. more bad news. One of the critical issues that Treasury has been raising, this country depends fundamentally on public finances for the transformation plan. And the public finances are at risk, are very much at risk. The bad news, well, that's bad news. The other bad news is that Treasury is deeply concerned about domestic risks. Now, this economy already is exposed heavily to global risks, but they're mostly worried right now about the domestic risks. Some of the issues you've already raised, for example, financial risk related to SOEs, management and tax collection capability and revenue services is another, levels of corruption. And so,
because I'm going to explore how we move forward.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting policies. Yeah. What I'm saying is, so what that means is, when your risks, I know that sounds very problematic, and it really is. Yeah. When your risks are global, like you're worried about a financial meltdown, there's not a whole lot you can do about that as a small economy like South Africa. When your risks are domestic, they should actually be within your control to fix. I hate to say it, but that's good news, because if the situation was only linked to commodity cycles, we would be in deep trouble.
So most of the risks and challenges are within our sphere of control.
Yeah, they're within our sphere of control.
But my problem is, have we and do we have the capability and capacity to actually deal with these problems, the domestic problems?
Well, we're going to be having to put more, this is why I'm raising it, we're going to have, and this is what we're going to need from the president.
Now, the lost opportunity that you spoke about, Thabi, earlier on during the break, right? If you can highlight some of the things that have set us back that we've got to fix anyway going forward.
So I think, the state-owned entities are a huge problem. And you did ask, is aviation sector, like SAA, SA Express, developmental in nature? And I think that there are risks of having an external owner owning your national carrier, because if anything happens domestically, nothing stops these investors from leaving, and you're stuck now with having no national carrier. The other thing is that there are low-hanging fruits. I know I spoke about earlier spatial development that we haven't really focused on. We still have apartheid structural development. We are not having that discussion as much as we should. We spoke about the education problem. But, again, I still don't know whether we have the common drive to deal with the country's ills, the problems that we have. We have Labour pulling from one side, we have opposition parties, we have also I feel like the ANC then reacting and then having their own policies, which may be reactive rather than well thought through. And one of them is the land one, where, for instance, it was easy to justify the not changing the constitution and having expropriation without compensation to anyone, including investors, to say, actually, this isn't a constitution, so we don't have to change anything, and you don't have to worry that we'll end up being like a Zimbabwe. But now when there are suggestions of having to change the constitution, so there are a lot of things that we're moving forward and then we're moving backwards,
and that's exactly
affecting policy.
That confuses a lot of South Africans, especially the ones who are not who are marginalized completely, not participating in the economy, right? 30% plus of people not being active in the economy is a huge number, because why would you buy into a system, really, if for years and decades, in some instances, you've never really benefited from this political freedom? There's no way your loyalty can be guaranteed to the Constitution, I think, in the long term. And then they ask themselves, still, there's so much wealth, pockets of wealth, even though entrenched in a few hands. And people wonder, are the wealthy paying their fair share? And why is government finding it difficult to get as much as it can from the wealthy? But of course, get as much in order to use productively, constructively, not get as much and then waste it in corruption and other poorly determined investments. Yeah, is it something that can be done, that should be done, and it's not happening there?
I think an employment-orientated economy, it's not actually rocket science. Countries that do well on employment you invest in people, you raise the issue of health, you have education, you have people who are educated to a reasonable level. You don't have to be in a university, but you know, who can comprehend, who in this day and age are digitally enabled. That issue of, you know, we're discussing expropriation, but I'd like to see more discussion about home ownership, because people use homes for all sorts of reasons, including small business. I'd like to see more transactional finance. You know, people can get loans to buy clothes, but you can't get loans for a small business in this country, particularly.
But you can get a loan for consumption.
Yeah, so we, you know, people have rising debt, they don't own assets. So that is not a recipe for an employment-oriented economy. If you look at economies that are successful, like Vietnam or China or Malaysia, they've done the opposite. You know, you have business development, you have education, you have a healthy population, you have an e-enabled population. You know, as I say, it's not, I'm saying it's easy to do, but it's not rocket science either, how the equation stacks up.
Well, and the question of land has been introduced now, and I think a lot of people in South Africa believe that as soon as you expropriate land without compensation, everything is going to be hunky-dory.
Who you take the land from is
who you take the land from. I think the land discussion needs to be a lot more inclusive.
Okay, let's make it more inclusive in a short time. I'm introducing that topic when we return.